Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the Martech Show. So excited that today we have Rishi Dave, the CMO of MongoDB, and quite frankly, one of the pioneers of the Martech industry for, oh my goodness, like the past decade. We were just chatting. We've been at this together for a while.
Yes.
It's great to have you here. We're actually going to try a new format. The first 8 episodes of the Martech Show tended to be fairly slide-driven, presentation based. But I figured, yeah, for today's episode, just given your incredible experience, over the past 10 years, would love to just talk through that experience, what we've learned about the evolution of marketing and MarTech. Yeah, we'll take the first, 20 minutes or so of this ourselves, and then go ahead and, open up for Q&A from the audience as well, too. And I'm going to do a quick little hide non-video participants. Perfect. All right. So I guess maybe first and foremost, could you start by just, setting the stage of how did you get here?
Yes.
How did Rishi start out and end up in marketing?
Yes, and let's where when I started in marketing is the first time I met you over a decade ago, so I remember it fondly. So I started at Dell, where initially I was running web analytics, and believe it or not, like when I was in that role, I brought the first web analytics tool into Dell. Which is hard to believe, but that was a while ago. And, I spent a lot of time explaining to the organization why we need an outside tool, what's the benefit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I remember that was the same time we brought in the first marketing automation and all of that. And so eventually I was head of digital marketing for Dell's enterprise business. And then after that, I spent time as CMO at Dun & Bradstreet, which is a SaaS data and analytics company. I was CMO at Vonage, which is a kind of API, has a SaaS API platform for communications as well as SaaS applications. And now I'm a CMO at MongoDB, which is a kind of a modern general purpose database platform.
Yeah, and actually, does that have something to do with your background there?
Yes. So a little bit about my background. So one of our core audiences are developers. And so, in an effort to increase our awareness amongst developers around our Atlas platform, which is our cloud-based database where, it's a self-serve where developers come in and they start coding on it, we did a lot of research on developers. Developers don't like advertising. So we actually created a film around developers, and it's a very cool film. Put a lot of focus on high quality experience. It's called Day Zero. So go to mongodb.com day-0 and check it out. It's a super fun, choose your own adventure type film.
Wow, awesome. Okay, yeah. So developers don't like advertising, but films like The Matrix that they can participate in, that rocks. Okay,
absolutely.
well played, sir.
Geeky films that are like because it involves developers, but we made sure what the developers were doing was very authentic and real, and so we've gotten some street cred for that.
Nice. Well, listen, I mean, wow, maybe a place to start is, you are one of those few people who has had the benefit of like leading marketing organizations back from like, okay, that time at Dell and the digital marketing, for the enterprise at Dell. I'd love to just get your perspective on some combination of what the tools and the process and like what it was like to lead digital marketing then, and how you've started to see how that started to change.
Yeah, it's a great question. So back then, I think about some of the challenges I had. They were, and this is going to surprise some of your younger viewers. I had to spend a lot of time, just educating the organization and demonstrating that digital marketing actually works in something beyond just e-commerce, right? Because before then, digital marketing was really thought of as a consumer e-commerce store. That's what
Mm.
everyone thought about. And so, when I was kind of put in charge of running digital marketing for the B2B enterprise, it was a new thing at the time. And which is funny because was, always in the forefront of all these investments. And we were at the forefront back then. And so I spent a lot of time, demonstrating to the organization that, look, it's not, the new world is not just about salespeople operating on their own, cold calling customers, as you all know. And so I had to demonstrate, here's the power of online communities, the power of content and thought leadership marketing, how you can accelerate lead gen and lower the cost of acquisition, et cetera. And then, like I mentioned before, why marketing technology, which just started becoming a thing back then, how you can leverage off the shelf applications. Bringing in off the shelf SaaS type applications was, again, not a typical thing at the time. And, security and IT and all that. And so that was the world then. And then fast forward, and then a lot of, and then back then, and Scott, you remember this, like we talked about, like, how do you work with your IT department? How do you pick the right tool, technology, et cetera. Fast forward to now, it's a completely different world, as Scott talks about in his blog and content. So it's been an incredible evolution to a place where nobody thought about marketing technology and IT played a heavy role, to today where IT plays a minimal role. I've owned the marketing technology strategy and had the talent within my organization, and it's really about, there's so much out there. How do you pick the right thing and focus and all those kind of things? It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems like one of the like common threads, that these 10 years have given us is, we started in a place that was highly siloed. There was marketing, IT, for that matter, even like marketing versus sales. We should get
Yes.
to some of that. But even within marketing, like, it was still, I believe, around that time where like just digital marketing was kind of treated as its own, separate world. And,
Yes.
then there was the real marketing, with the advertising budget and the agencies and all that fun stuff. And so I find it interesting, like, okay, when around that time, you made the shift from Dell and took over the CMO role at Dun & Bradstreet. I suspect that was still an environment where like digital marketing and the other aspects of marketing weren't fully integrated in most organizations. What was that like coming in, as the CMO now, responsible for the whole marketing organization?
Yeah, it was hard. So it's not easy to move from being a expert in a part of marketing, where I grew up on the digital marketing side for B2B digital marketing, and that's really where I had my experience, had my career, um, obviously passion there as well, and then kind of going into a role where I was CMO running everything. It was a big leap. And I think the big leap is not necessarily like just having to understand more functions, although that's hard, but it's also the CMO role is just a different role, in that it's not always just about marketing execution. It's also about the relationships you build with the board of directors, the relationships you have with the rest of the C-suite, how you leverage a marketing and marketing technology and digital mentality in driving the go forward strategy of the company. And that's the big leap, I think. And I often think that, like, I remember those days when I was just running marketing and my passion was marketing. But when you become a CMO, you don't necessarily just do marketing execution. There's a lot of other things you have to do beyond marketing. And so that was a big leap for me. And it was tough. It was tough.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you came into that role, like having the opportunity to sort of like, shape the organization around a more unified vision, like what did that look like? Like how did you think about structuring the teams to get the digital components of marketing just better integrated with, the rest of the organization?
Yeah. I mean, the fundamental, so the challenge is always, there's tons of directions you could go. And you just, let's take the marketing tech as an example. Like, there's tons of Martech out there, as you publish every year.
Phew.
And you walk into a company, and oftentimes you look at the Martech stack, and it's like duplicative, overspend, underspend, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. And so, you see that, and then you take that in every group, and you see all those kind of things. And then if the company has acquired other companies, then you have duplicative stuff and all that stuff. And so ultimately it goes back to marketing 101, where you kind of step back and say, wait a minute, like, what is the corporate strategy? What is the marketing strategy? Have a strong focus on, here are the 2 or 3 things that I need to get done, and the biggest levers I can pull, and then start to look at what you do in the marketing organization. Like, for example, it's very clear that we need to scale customer acquisition. And so, and working with the sales team to do that. So, for example, having a Martech stack that was duplicative, and having a lot of things that were doing multiple things, and having a lot of people trying to manage it all, like rationalizing that, focusing that, was a big focus of mine. And then, digital marketing, comms, all that. I had to look through everything and just really focus everyone on the core 2 or 3 things. And that's ultimately, I think, the way to look at it is, as a CMO, you have to really distill things to their essence, to the 2 or 3 things.
That makes a lot of sense. I remember at the time we had some conversations around some of the ways, like, at the organizational level, you were implementing these kind of agile marketing techniques. And agile marketing, as a phrase, gets thrown around a lot,
Right.
But I think, ultimately, like, the simplest version of that is to say, listen, let's recalibrate how teams work, given the environment that we have that allows us to be a lot more flexible than, we were 10, 20 years ago. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about, like, some of those approaches and techniques you had worked with that team?
Yeah, definitely. I number one, really hone in on the 2 or 3 things. And then obviously there's different levels of execution you have to do under that. And then what are the kind of, the 4 or 5 projects that you just must execute? That's where I think we benefit a lot from kind of these agile teams, where you kind of say, look, and it's not like agile methodology, like pure agile, with agile coaches and all that, but it's kind of the conceptually agile, where you say, okay, so these are 3 or 4 things. Here's the kind of tiger team. So I took a very tiger team-like approach at Dun & Bradstreet, because that was what was needed at that particular company, and said, here's the cross-functional tiger team that has to kind of drive these projects. And then it was sprints, right? It was like, what are we going to do in the next week, next 4 weeks? And then just kind of staying maniacally focused on that. The focus piece, and then using agile to focus on 2 or 3 or 4 core things, I think that's critical to just getting things done and moving quickly, and then instilling that culture that you can kind of spread around it. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of CMOs make is they get overwhelmed by the volume and the noise, and then you just don't kind of move forward. And so I think the focus piece is very critical, because, as you know, Scott, like, marketing is now everything. It's everything and nothing, right? And so unless you have that mentality, it's not like, not trying to knock my finance colleagues, but it's not like finance, where finance is very defined. This is what finance does and does not do. That's not true with marketing. And so it's up to the CMO to really focus their organization.
Yeah, it's funny. Some of these concepts, I feel like they keep coming around with different names. Like, there were tiger teams,
Yes.
there were, the agile teams. Like, in the past couple of years too, I've also heard, people saying, the way you need to do this is you need to have pods, and the pods
is the new
are,
thing.
these cross-functional people who move very quickly. And I'm like, I feel like I've heard this before somewhere, but I actually take it as a good sign that these patterns, like, keep, like, re-emerging anew, is like some indication that, there's something actually real there.
Yeah, because I think what happens is that, what happens is that you come up with these new concepts, like a tiger team, and then all of a sudden everyone adopts the concept, but they don't adopt it the same way, and they kind of have a different interpretation, and then over time it doesn't work, because people adopt a different way, and then it becomes a bad word, and then nobody wants to use that word anymore. And then they do something called a pod, which is identical thing, but it's rebranded, right? And you could see that with so many marketing trends is that, it's a hot thing, and then it kind of goes off in a different direction. And then a new thing comes up with a new name that's somewhat similar, but rebranded. And that happens, there's so many examples of that, Tiger Teams, Agile, pods, QBRs,
The great wheel keeps turning.
yes. Yes.
All right. Yeah, after you were CMO at Dun& Bradstreet, you were then CMO at Vonage, recently this year as a CMO of MongoDB. Congratulations, by the way. I've always been a big fan of MongoDB and a big fan of yours. And so it's like, chocolate and peanut butter coming together. I love it.
It was curious. A dream job for me, honestly. It was a dream job. I've always admired the company, and so when this opportunity came up, it was a dream job for me.
I love when that happens.
I know.
So moving over, I guess it was about a 6-year period, 3 different CMO roles, coming into a new company now 3 different times, have you gotten some sort of sense of coming into that environment, how sort of the thinking within those teams or, the existing capabilities, technology operations wise, but, even more broadly, did you start to see okay, what I'm starting with, in each different, opportunity there, in some ways is charting a path of the maturity of just how the industry has been evolving. Any, reflections there?
Yeah, it's interesting. Each company I've joined, it's been a totally different challenge. And so I think that focusing a lot on not trying to cut and paste too much, because what you described is exactly right. If every company is different, but also things are evolving very differently in terms of the role of technology, the role of data, the role of AI, all those kind of things. The skill set of the type of marketers have changed as well. And so there's a lot of trends that I've seen, but I think the most important thing is when I'm in an organization, I spend the first 3-4 months just listening and learning, and not trying to make any change, because if you try to make change too early, you may be misguided, right? Because you haven't learned enough. And so that's the big thing I've learned. And then, when the question you ask on what has changed over those evolutions, it's you kind of see the marketer has moved from a generalist to a specialist. You kind of see the role of technology has shifted, and you've talked about this extensively, from you need to have a handful of technologies and you have to work with your IT department, to marketing is completely autonomous and they have to assemble the right portfolio of SaaS applications, and IT doesn't get involved except advice. And so that's evolved. The role of data in making decisions and removing variability, that's evolved to become a bigger and bigger deal over time. And then, and so there's been a lot of kind of changes that I've seen over time in terms of the marketing role. And then some roles, have stayed the same and have only become more critical, like field marketing, right? Having great field marketers out in the field as partners with sales teams, that's always been the same, right? Running great events, as you know, Scott, that you still have to run great events, whether it's physical or virtual. So some things haven't changed and some things have changed completely.
Makes sense. So having now had marketing technology and marketing operations report up to you in a number of different companies, any advice, perspectives you'd give people all right, we've got some other CMOs who are listening to this and they're all right, Rishi, what would be your recommendations to me about how I should think about, managing marketing ops and marketing tech in my org?
Yeah. So the advice I would give other CMOs is you need a strong head of marketing operations who is both technical as well as, analytical, but also influential. I think that the head of marketing ops role has evolved as well, where, it used to be kind of more kind of just focused on technology or just focused on data, et cetera. Now it's a lot of marketing ops folks are driving a lot of the data strategy, the analytics, or working with analytics teams, et cetera, and becoming much more strategic. And a lot of the other groups within marketing are now, have to work very closely with the marketing ops teams, and so they have to be very good at working with other teams, influence, et cetera. Versus historically it was like, let's get a really good IT guy or a technologist. And so I think getting a strong marketing ops leader is very critical. I think the second thing that I've seen over time is, consolidating technology. Like there was a moment where everyone was buying their own everyone was buying their own technology on the edge, like I do this function. There's a specialized SaaS application that helps me with my function. I'm going to bring it in. And I think, over time, that I think has shifted again. And I've been very focused on, I have to consolidate all our SaaS technology and marketing tech under one person so that we can, negotiate, we can rationalize, we can remove duplication. We can truly bring in the best in breed technologies. So many have to work together. And so that's very critical as well. And then also for the individual functional leader in the field or wherever, SaaS application vendors are very good at getting them excited, right? And it's like, getting them because they know how to speak their language, but it's like, sometimes it's not the best solution. And so, I think I've seen a lot of that. So really advice I would give is get a great marketing ops leader, consolidate the technology under the marketing ops leader. Think about the data strategy, I think should also be under the marketing ops leader. And then how do you make that function more strategic as an enabler for the rest of the organization, which is not easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, in that mode of having the technology serve as an enabler for like the broader marketing team, or frankly, even the broader organization with sales and customer success. I feel like this topic keeps coming back up. There was like Gartner paper or whatnot the other month or so saying once again, utilization, people are struggling. They get this technology, and then at the end of the day, when they really evaluate it, they're just not putting it to use.
Yes.
How do you think about addressing that challenge? I mean, you've faced that challenge yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's again, important when you have it under one leader to kind of abstract above it and think about what is the strategy. So I'll give you a great example. I won't mention vendor names, but I'll give you a great example that I recently faced is that you have somebody like in the field who wants to work with a vendor that does intent, right? Like says let's say somebody's doing ABM, for example, who there's a vendor that approaches them and says, oh, we can give you information on when an account that you're following or working on does this, that, the other thing, and there's a lot of but then is that's being looked at in a silo, right? And I've seen this evolution in multiple companies. That same vendor has come in, you look at it, it's exciting, but then when you actually use it, it's like it's not as helpful. It's like could be anybody in the organization demonstrating intent versus the one you care about, blah 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 blah. Versus you bring that vendor into a centralized function and you look at it as part of your scoring model, right? And that's one more value into your scoring model in addition to 10 other vendors and other data points and all that. And then that marketing ops person can provide a powerful score to that ABM leader on more than just that one intent vendor that she or he can use to be more effective. Like that's a great tactical example. And this, you multiply that times the sheer volume of marketing technology, and you can see why when you don't do that, you get massive underutilization. And so that's why when you bring it in centrally and you have a strong strategic marketing ops leader who understands the business, they can think more strategically about who you use, remove duplication, and then how do they all work together to drive strategy.
Cool. All right. So there's maybe three different directions to this leadership role. There's the how you empower teams within your org. There's the relationships with your peers. The head of IT, the head of sales. Any advice now on how to get that collaboration to be really effective in today's environment?
Yeah, it's Well, first of all, you have to prioritize it. I've talked to a lot of CMOs, and sometimes you can easily get wrapped up in just your organization and your silo, and you can't do that as a CMO. And oftentimes, when people have their first CMO jobs, as I mentioned before, that's the biggest
Mhm.
pitfall, one of the biggest pitfalls. So just understanding and prioritizing that your job is really about running the company first with a marketing mindset and a marketing expertise. That's important to have that mindset. And then secondly, with that mindset, how do you kind of partner with head of product, head of sales, the technical teams to actually drive the future of the company, whether it's your product strategy, your company strategy, your communications or marketing strategy. You have to make that a collaborative effort because everyone influences that now. You can't do it in a silo. Um, and then you also have to help your own organization collaborate better outside the organization as well. That ultimately, I think, is your number two job after recruiting great talent.
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess one more direction, which is up. And you had alluded to this a bit earlier, like, certainly for marketing overall, having that relationship with the C-suite and the board seems really critical. But in particular around marketing technology and marketing operations and the investments in that, how do you communicate the value of those investments and the approach to that?
Yeah, you demonstrate how you're using it to drive the business. So I'll give you an example. Like, we have an amazing. So this is a little bit. We have an amazing board. Um, that's very tech savvy. So we have a bit of advantage there. But like, when you talk about how you're driving growth, right? You kind of bring in how you're leveraging data and analytics to become better and better at targeting, at segmentation, et cetera. You bring in how you're leveraging these tools and technologies to talk about how you're going to strategically get that next level of growth or that next level of change in perception, et cetera. And so it's not about not talking about the technology. Like I never talk about like, hey, I'm using this technology, that technology, but I do talk about how, okay, here's how I'm leveraging data or scoring or intent or etc. And here's how I'm thinking about evolving it going forward to drive that next level of growth or get that next persona we need to go after, etc. And so, talking to the board, talking to everyone in terms of how you're using leveraging technology and data to drive that next year or that differentiation versus competition, I think that's where it becomes really effective.
All
And
right,
and,
cool.
and look, like we are like we're going against like the biggest brand names on the planet, and so it's important that um you know we have to execute better, and so
Yeah.
that's critical.
All right, so we've got some questions that are starting to come in from the audience. This one's a little bit down in the technology side of this, but be cool to hear your answer to this. All right, this is a pitch coming your way on MongoDB. All right, SQL remains the predominant data retrieval language, no matter its actual data storage technology of SQL or NoSQL. Futuristically, what might the consumerization of NoSQL mean for a database data platform as a service? This seems like a real strategic marketing challenge for you to drive growth.
So what might the consumerization of NoSQL mean for data? Uh, so uh, I think that if you look at kind of the future of NoSQL, um, you know, obviously this is why I joined MongoDB. I really believe that it is the future, right? So I know that SQL and relationship databases are kind of the dominant form today. The challenge that has is that that technology was built 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, when applications were not in the cloud, they were inside enterprises, and they weren't used by that many users, right? Like a finance application. What I think is going to happen is, with these applications that are all being built in the cloud and they have to be massively globally scalable, with huge, large number of users, which is basically the way applications are being built today. Those old technologies no longer are relevant, and that's the power of kind of MongoDB and document and NoSQL, is that what it will do is it's really developer centric, right? And it's like significantly easier for developers to code on a NoSQL database. So when you talk about consumerization, I mean, it's really, that's exactly that's actually a good thing, right? That's benefiting a company like MongoDB, as more developers much prefer NoSQL and document-based databases than any other kind of databases, because it unleashes a significant amount of productivity. And so I think that's really where the future is going.
All right, cool. You passed the tech credibility question here. Thanks for that question, Bill. For the rest of our audience, yeah, please do send in your questions. I might suggest, so we don't go too deep down, the database architecture.
Yeah, no problem.
Topic. Let's hit more on the marketing and Martech side. But while we're waiting for those other questions, I guess one of the ones I'd love to ask you is, it's the 2020 question. I mean, what has this been like, for you working, I assume remotely, but also having, teams remotely, and I mean, taking on a new job and getting to know new teams like remotely. What's this been like for you?
It's been hard. I came into the company, only having met one person in person, in a very socially distanced way. And so my entire interview process, meeting everyone, and my entire experience at this company has been virtual so far. And it's been tough. It's been exhausting. I think that but the hardest thing is how do you keep your team engaged, excited, motivated in this remote environment. I mean, that's been my biggest challenge. As hard as it is for me, it's 10x harder for my team, and I see it, in terms of taking care of kids and taking care of home and being home all the time, and just the mental toll that this takes. And so, it's very different, in the sense of, like, you're used to, as an executive in a tech company, drive, but you have to really kind of pull back and say, look, we're all dealing with a lot of things. And so we have to be much more empathetic than we ever have been to each other and to what's going on. And maybe we can't drive all the time, but we have to empathize and think and manage and plan and all that. And so I think it's just such a different environment. It's been tough. But I have to, we have to kind of keep very focused on the actual teams and what they need and what they're facing outside of work.
What about on the side of just, so those are like internally with your teams, but, engaging with customers? I mean, you mentioned B2B, like events, were always a significant channel of leads, and people have had to adapt to that. Any lessons, advice on, like adapting to these virtual events that you found work?
Yeah, I mean, so we've gone virtual like everyone else. I think that the key learning there is that you have to kind of maintain a high quality experience, just as close as high quality as you can, as the physical experience. And you have to try to simulate the serendipity of, like, going to an event and meeting people and all that. It's hard to do, but I think that's what people value. And so I think, so I think you have to really do that. But I also think that people are getting exhausted. And I think people are getting exhausted with virtual events as well. And so our challenge as marketers is to figure out, how do we engage customers or help customers continually in different ways beyond just, virtual events or Zoom, et cetera. Because I think there's a lot of fatigue going on, or just webinars. And so that's the challenge. I don't know what the right answer is, but that's the big challenge. Now, the one thing though that's I don't know if it's good or bad, but like, it's digital has been much more effective than it has ever been, because a couple of reasons. One is that everyone is digital right now, so there's just more people leveraging digital and in digital and consuming digital experiences. But also, there's a lot of people have pulled back on digital advertising, unfortunately, and because of the nature of what they're doing or their industry or whatever has been affected by COVID. And so it's been a weird dynamic when it comes to digital marketing and digital experiences, where there's more people than ever, but there's also fewer advertisers and fewer people involved. And so it's just been, that's what I've kind of seen. So like we've actually really ramped up our digital marketing and digital experiences and all that. But we again have to kind of moderate the fact that there's also fatigue going on. So that's why, going back to this this film that I talked about, like it's actually about, what I just talked about. People are tired of webinars, they're getting tired of virtual events, they've gone to so many. So can we give them a different experience that would be fun, that would be just different and entertaining, that that they've never done yet? And that's why we thought of more about a film, and we put a lot of effort into making it really fun and authentic, so that our customers and prospects can be entertained in a different way.
Awesome. And that film's Day Zero, right? So
Day Zero.
MongoDB Day Zero. I'm definitely checking that out. All right. So I've got a few more questions from the audience. I want to squeeze these in. Chris Rigg, great question. What are common mistakes that first-time CMOs make?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that the number one thing is recognizing that you're not just doing marketing, but you're running the company. And also recognizing that working with your fellow C-levels and working with the board is kind of as critical as actually executing the marketing piece. So I think that oftentimes first-time CMOs still think that, okay, I'm still doing a functional marketing role just on a bigger scale. And it's actually a more significant shift than that.
All right. Next question from Ben. In the last couple of years, what emerging marketing technologies have you been most excited about or have been game changers for your marketing org?
I would say AI and data. Leveraging AI and data to better target customers, segment customers, prioritize accounts on a continual basis, I think has been the biggest game changer for marketing and for kind of what I've seen. And in fact, like I have, so that's kind of, from a CMO perspective and a marketing perspective, but I've also, I kind of like to look at kind of what's on the edge of what's coming in the future that hasn't really come yet. And, without giving details, like I do see that, it's AI is going to have a greater impact on marketing than just building models and training models and becoming, et cetera. People are really coming up with very unique ways to leverage AI to really rethink the advertising and experiences, et cetera. And so right now I'm excited about, leveraging data and analytics to kind of, really focus and target, et cetera, and be more efficient. But in the horizon, I'm excited about kind of these new models that people are coming up with in marketing to leverage AI beyond just segmenting and prioritizing customers and building typical models.
Well, let me build on that with a question I'm curious to ask you about, particularly given like your experience at Vonage. Like we were originally going to have you speak at the Martech conference in the spring, and then the Martech conference didn't actually happen in the spring. But you had this really interesting topic about CMOs and APIs. And I think it's interesting that, we are seeing in the market, I mean, yes, there's this incredible collection of commercial off-the-shelf solutions that are packaged, you plug them in, you run with them. But there's also, all these incredible solutions, Vonage has been one of them, that they're more about giving businesses, a set of fundamental capabilities that then they customize and pull together, using a little bit of code, or I guess maybe even in some cases, these no-code solutions. I'm curious, like, what your take is on this balance of like sort of the new build versus buy.
I mean, I think that, ultimately CMOs are going to become more and more technical and more, technical in the sense of kind of, building custom experiences. And so I think like, the thing that that APIs allow you to do is they allow you to really construct customized experiences for customers that are unique to you and become a differentiator. So I'll give you an example outside the tech industry. Like you look at like the customer experience you can architect as a hospital, right? Or where you can kind of leverage APIs, in terms of how you attract a customer, how you attract a patient. When they come in, you can build custom applications so that they can set up appointments. They can use telemedicine, video APIs to interact with their doctor. When they're done with that, they can leverage an application that's a custom application for how they monitor their health, they get their records, etc. They get the next appointment. And so like the entire, like a hospital now can create a custom experience and journey for their patient leveraging APIs. And the power of that is they don't have to write a lot of code because it's all off the shelf APIs that they just piece the building blocks to piece together the experience. And then you kind of take that even further, with no code, and I know you've talked about this, like you can build those experiences without even having the code. So I think that's really, the future of customer experience. And I think, marketers are still going to own customer experience, and they're going to increasingly leverage, the APIs to construct those custom experiences and no code.
All right. I have a ton of questions I would just love to ask you, but I know we are coming up on time. So let me ask one last question to close with. You talked a bit about those first-time CMOs and how they should approach that. Let's go further back in someone's career. For folks just starting out in marketing now, it's like their first or second job, but they aspire to be the CMO. What advice would you have for them?
I would say two things. One is just become an expert in whatever domain you're passionate about. I think that marketing has become a very specialized discipline. And so, becoming a true expert in whatever area you're focused on, really focus on expertise, which is going to be, which is everything from, learning, building your networks to learn, formal training, etc., and always being up to date in whatever your expertise is. And then obviously you got to just execute flawlessly. Well, not flawlessly, but execute really well, within your function to really grow within marketing. And so I think that's critical. And I think the second thing is, as you grow, how do you build more influence in your organization? I think that CMO ultimately is generally great CMOs are ones who know how to influence a broad swath of people. And you look at people starting their career, you see people who are they're experts in their function. They execute really well, and that gives them the currency to build influence in their organization, to push their organization forward beyond just what they do. And as they grow in the organization, they get more and more influence. And I think those are the two things that that if you can do, you'd be set up really well. And I often get the question, I'm like, should I focus on what area of marketing should I focus on? I don't think it matters. I think it matters more to just, be that expert and build that influence.
Awesome advice. Rishi, thank you so much for taking this time with us. It was great to catch up with you. I'm going to go watch the Day Zero video right now.
Please do.
And here's to a bigger and better 2021 ahead.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone, and a great 2021.
All right. Thank you. Bye.